If a state doesn't defeat crime, it's because it's complicit, or parts of the state are complicit. Once a state frees itself from complicity with delinquency and takes strong action against the criminals, it defeats them.
Last week, Nayib Bukele attended the groundbreaking for a new mega prison similar to CICAT in Costa Rica. The country's facing record homicides, fueled mostly by drug trafficking. And after 4 years in power, President Rodrigo Chaves claims the only way to fix this is to put his successor, Laura Fernández, in charge in the elections on February 1st and replicate Bukele's rule. I'm Roman Garcia, the editor of El Faro English. You're listening to our weekly podcast, Central America in Minutes.
In Nicaragua, the house arrest of Daniel Ortega's brother
relates more to El Salvador and Honduras than to Guatemala. In the case of Guatemala,
globalism comes to die at CIPAC, but in El Salvador, it's already dead.
Central America in Minutes, an original podcast by El Faro English.
Costa Rica will hold presidential and legislative elections in 9 days on Sunday, February 1st. And just 2 days ago, pollsters at the University of Costa Rica put ruling party Pueblo Soberano, or Sovereign People candidate, Laura Fernández, far ahead of the pack with 40% of the vote. This would allow Fernández, a former minister of the presidency and confidant of President Rodrigo Chaves, to win outright on election night, rather than holding a runoff on April 5th. 40% is the exact threshold she would need. And she jumped 10 points in the polls in the last month as more and more undecided voters have staked out a position. According to UCR polling, 1/3 of voters are still undecided. But the second place candidate, Álvaro Ramos of the traditional National Liberation Party, or PLN, is way behind with 8%. The next 4 candidates combined only hold 17% of intended votes. Rodrigo Chaves won the presidency 4 years ago as a Trump-inspired candidate promising to make Costa Rica prosperous again. He has been in constant conflict with the Costa Rican judiciary and legislature, claiming that they've tied his hands as the country has seen a sharp increase in violence. Chaves, who has kept a steady approval rating around 58%, is now seeking a seat in the Legislative Assembly. And Fernández, his party's candidate, has called her presidential platform a plan of continuity. She has also called herself Chavez's heir. Enter Nayib Bukele, Central America's most popular politician. He and Chaves have cultivated close ties, repeatedly visiting and endorsing each other. Bukele hasn't named Fernández explicitly, but he said that the country should remain on the same track. When Bukele attended the prison groundbreaking this week, he recalled his dismissal of Salvadoran constitutional magistrates and other senior judges in 2021, which consolidated his control over the 3 branches of government. As Andres Dimas reports, Chaves has branded the future prison as CACO, or CACCO, in a similar acronym to the Salvadoran facility CICAT. Chaves proposed that Costa Rica should push much further. This CACO will stay empty if our laws and judiciary aren't changed, he said, adding, Mr. President Nayib Bukele has laid out for us what a dictatorship of organized crime is like. Only fools don't learn from others. Next, we turn to Honduras, which has begun the transfer of power. At least as far as the electoral authorities are concerned, all of the crisscrossing fraud allegations and denunciations of irregularities have been reduced to background noise for now. President-elect Tito Asfura met on Sunday, January 18th, with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. As we covered last week, days earlier he met with the Trump administration and Israeli ambassador in Washington. Outgoing ruling party Libre has called the incoming National Party administration a de facto government, but President Xiomara Castro has said she'll still hand over power. And Congress will hold its swearing-in and first session on Sunday, January 25th. Asfura will be sworn in on Tuesday, the 27th. The head of the National Party caucus, Tommy Zambrano, was named president of the Provisional Executive Board of Congress. His party will hold the largest share of seats with 49 out of 128. The National and Liberal parties announced early agreements at the headquarters of the powerful business association COEP, putting aside election season beef. An alliance could give them a combined 90 votes, a majority of almost 3/4. Zambrano says the top priority will be to reform the country's electoral system, including expanding the time between the deadline to declare results and inauguration, and adding a runoff for the presidency, all points of weakness last year. As for Libre, they now hold 35 seats, making them the third power in the legislature. And it's even visible in the comms department of Congress, which is hardly nonpartisan. Overnight, the X account went from boosting Libre to the National Party. Last time around, in 2022, legislators from Libre broke out into a brawl amongst themselves on the floor of Congress over who would be president. This year, the Trump-aligned National Party is promising dialogue and consensus. But after a virulent election marked by the heavy hand of Donald Trump, the question could be consensus with whom? Hey, before our last segment, I want to tell you about our newsletter. This week, we covered the new state of siege in Guatemala, the third in Central America. As always, it's free. Go to elfaro.net/en to get El Faro English in your inbox. Last we turned to El Salvador, where Nayib Bukele used Interpol to go after an exiled photojournalist in Spain. On January 2nd, Spanish police arrested Diego Rosales, who had arrived in Sevilla to request asylum. Spain was complying with an Interpol red notice issued from El Salvador and presented Rosales before the Audiencia Nacional for a hearing. This came as little surprise to Rosales, as Graciela Barrera reports. Days earlier, his brother had been detained in Argentina, where he's a university professor. His family had faced months of harassment at their home in El Salvador from the police under the state of exception. Rosales, who's 25 years old, has published photography in outlets including The Guardian, El País, and El Faro. In El Salvador, where the judiciary and prosecutors' offices are tightly and personally controlled by Bukele, an organized crime court has charged him with digital theft and illicit association. El Faro reviewed the indictment and found that the only alleged evidence provided against Rosales was a bank transfer of under $2,000 from his brother. Prosecutors claimed that this money was obtained from Bitcoin fraud involving over 50 people, including 2 of his brothers. But Rosales asserts that he has never used Bitcoin. He began preparing his asylum request after learning of the charges, arguing that he wouldn't receive due process in El Salvador. In the last year, dozens of journalists, human rights defenders, and other dissidents have fled El Salvador to avoid political arrest by Bukele's police, which often lure people from their homes on false pretenses. When Reporters Without Borders and the Salvadoran Journalists Association denounced Rosales' arrest, Bukele responded on X. "The new immunity is to be called a journalist," he said, and claimed journalists receive total impunity. Based on Rosales' testimony, the Audiencia Nacional released him. The Salvadoran government, which has made similar moves against at least 2 human rights defenders in Spain, has 40 days to present a formal extradition request. Meanwhile, his asylum case is ongoing. "Nobody has granted me immunity anywhere in the world," he said, adding, "Bukele says that Spain protects delinquents, but El Salvador pursues the innocent." Thanks for streaming Central American Minutes. My partner in Thought Crime, Juliana Ramazzini, is out this week, so I wrote today's episode with sound design by Omnion and support from the Canada Fund for Local Initiatives. Find us wherever you do your streaming, and we'll be back next week. Hasta pronto.